It was a bright morning, the kind that makes the city feel alive. Birds were chirping softly, and the air carried the smell of freshly cut grass. In one corner of the city, a man named Richard Hale sat quietly in his car, watching families walk into the park. He was one of the richest men in town, a billionaire known for his big business and big heart. Yet behind his calm eyes there was a sadness that even money couldn't fix. Beside him sat his 8-year-old son, Ethan, a sweet boy with golden hair and curious blue eyes. Ethan was born with a disability that made it hard for him to walk. He used a small wheelchair, one that Richard had custom designed to be light and easy for his son. But no matter how advanced it was, it couldn't protect Ethan from the looks people gave him. Those looks, a mix of pity and discomfort, broke Richard's heart every time. Richard had everything that people dream of: mansions, cars, fame, respect, but he often felt powerless. He would trade all his money if it meant his son could run across the grass like other children. Sometimes when he watched other kids play, laughing and chasing each other, he wondered what Ethan felt. Did he wish to be like them? Did he notice how they sometimes stared? These thoughts stayed with Richard every single day. That morning he decided to take Ethan out for a change. It was a warm day, the sky was clear, and the park wasn't too crowded. Richard parked his car and gently lifted Ethan into his wheelchair. "Ready for an adventure, buddy?" he asked with a smile. Ethan nodded, his little face lighting up. "Yes, Dad. Let's go feed the ducks," he said excitedly. His voice always had that spark of hope, something that gave Richard strength even when his heart ached. They rolled down the path, past the fountain and towards the pond. Richard pushed the wheelchair slowly so Ethan could enjoy the view. The ducks were already there, waiting for crumbs from visitors. Ethan giggled when one brave duck came close to his wheels. "Look, Dad. He's not scared of me," he said proudly. Richard laughed softly. "Maybe he knows you're the kind one," he replied. For a while, everything felt peaceful. The morning sun warmed their faces, and the sound of children playing filled the air. Richard could almost forget the pain. He felt like any other father spending time with his child. But deep down he knew their reality was different. Not everyone saw Ethan the way he did. Some people only saw the chair, not the child in it. As they sat by the pond, Richard watched other parents from a distance. Some looked at him with admiration, others with quiet curiosity. He could tell they recognized him, the famous businessman who built schools, hospitals, and companies. But what they didn't know was how lonely he sometimes felt. Fame had brought him attention, not peace. He often wished for a normal life, one where people didn't see his son as different. Ethan didn't care about any of that. He loved simple things: the smell of flowers, the sound of the water, the feel of sunlight on his face. He looked at the ducks again and asked, "Dad, do you think I can run one day?" The question hit Richard like a wave. He paused for a moment, then knelt beside his son. "I don't know, Ethan, but what I do know is that you can fly in your own way," he said softly. Ethan smiled. "Like a duck?" Richard laughed through the lump in his throat. "Exactly, just like a duck." They both laughed, and for a moment nothing else mattered. But as they moved toward the playground area, things changed. A few kids playing nearby noticed Ethan and started whispering. Their eyes followed his wheelchair, and one of them pointed. Richard's heart sank. He knew what was coming. He tried to stay calm, hoping they would just go back to their game. But instead, one boy, maybe 12 years old, said loudly, "Hey, why can't he walk? Is he broken?" The other kids laughed. Ethan looked down, silent. His little hands tightened on the armrest. Richard felt anger rise inside him, but before he could say anything, Ethan whispered, "It's okay, Dad." His voice trembled, but he forced a smile, trying to be brave. Richard knelt beside him again. "You don't have to be okay with that, son," he said quietly. Just then, a voice cut through the laughter. Firm, clear, and full of courage. "Hey, that's not funny." Everyone turned to see a teenage girl standing a few steps away. She wore a simple school uniform and had a bag slung over her shoulder. Her name was Amara Johnson, and she had been walking through the park on her way to work. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. She didn't know who Richard was, or that the boy in the chair was his son. All she saw was wrong, and she couldn't ignore it. In that moment, everything slowed down. Richard watched her step closer, her voice steady and fearless. "You shouldn't make fun of someone just because they're different," she said. He's stronger than all of you. The kids fell silent. Not knowing what to say, Amara looked at Ethan and smiled kindly. You're doing great, okay? She said softly. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with surprise. Richard was speechless. No one had ever stood up for his son like that before. Not a teacher, not a stranger, not even other parents, and here was a young girl, probably 16 or 17, defending Ethan without a second thought. It was the moment that would soon change all their lives, though none of them knew it yet. The sun shone brighter as if the world itself had paused to witness kindness. And in that quiet corner of the park, something beautiful began, a moment of courage that would soon turn into a life-changing story. Amara Johnson hurried down the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulder. The morning sun was already high, and she knew she was running late for her shift at the cafe. It wasn't easy being a student and an employee at the same time, but she didn't have a choice. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and her younger brother was still in school. Every rupee she earned helped keep the lights on and food on the table. Life had taught Amara to grow up fast. She wasn't one to complain, though. She believed in working hard and staying kind. That morning she had skipped breakfast again, saving the last piece of bread for her little brother. He needs it more than I do, she had told her mom with a smile. Her shoes were worn, her hands sometimes rough from washing dishes, but her heart was soft, the kind that noticed everything around her. As she walked through the park on a shortcut to the cafe, she took a deep breath. The air smelled of flowers and sunlight, and for a moment it made her forget how tired she was. She loved the park. It was one of the few peaceful places in the busy city. Sometimes she would sit on a bench after work just to watch people laugh and families play. It reminded her that happiness didn't always need money. It just needed moments. That morning, as she crossed the pond area, something caught her attention. A group of boys were laughing loudly near the benches. Their voices echoed through the air, but there was something about the laughter that didn't sound right. It wasn't joyful. It was sharp and mean. She turned her head and saw a little boy sitting in a wheelchair next to an older man. The boy looked sad, staring down at his hands while the man's face was tense. Amara slowed her steps, watching carefully. One of the boys pointed at the wheelchair, mocking the boy sitting in it. Hey, what's wrong with you? Can't walk? He jeered. The others giggled. Maybe he's a robot, another said. Laughing, Amara felt her heart twist. Her stomach tightened in anger. She didn't even think twice without planning it. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She walked straight toward them, her eyes fierce but calm. Stop it, she said sharply. The boys turned, surprised. Who are you? One of them asked. Someone who knows what respect means, she replied. Her voice didn't shake. She looked right at the tallest boy. You think it's funny to make fun of someone who can't walk? That doesn't make you strong, it makes you small. The words hit them harder than they expected. The boys looked at each other, suddenly unsure. We were just joking, one mumbled. It's not a joke when someone gets hurt, Amara said firmly. You don't know what that boy goes through every day. You don't know his story, so maybe keep quiet until you do. Her tone wasn't angry, just strong. The kind of strength that comes from having seen too much unfairness in the world. The boys went silent, one by one, stepping back. A few muttered an apology before walking away. Amara turned to the little boy, who was staring at her with wide eyes. You okay? She asked gently. The boy nodded slowly. Yeah, he whispered. Thank you, she smiled. Don't thank me. You didn't do anything wrong. For the first time, she noticed the man beside him. He was dressed simply, jeans, a white shirt, sunglasses. But there was something about him, a calm power that came from his presence. He looked at her with deep surprise and gratitude. That was very brave of you, he said quietly. Amara shrugged. It wasn't brave, it was just right. Richard Hale couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. For years, he had watched people look away when his son faced cruel stares or comments. Even adults who should have known better often pretended not to notice. But this young girl, a stranger, had stepped in without hesitation. Without knowing who he was, she didn't care about wealth, power, or appearances. She just did what was right. Ethan looked up at his father, his face glowing. Dad, she helped me, he said softly. Richard smiled, still trying to find words. She sure did, son, he replied. She sure did. Amara smiled back at the boy. You're stronger than they are, you know that? She said. Ethan nodded shyly. There was a pause, a quiet stillness between the three of them. The park noises faded for a moment, just the sound of leaves rustling and a bird singing nearby. Richard finally spoke. Can I ask your name? Amara hesitated. It's Amara, sir, she said. I was just passing by, Amara. Richard repeated softly as if memorizing it. That's a beautiful name. He wanted to ask more about who she was, where she was going, how she had learned such courage. But she looked at her watch and gasped, Oh no, I'm late. She said quickly, I have to go to work. She waved to Ethan. Take care, okay? And began to walk away. Ethan waved back. Smiling brightly now, Richard watched her leave, something stirring in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was realization in those few minutes. That young girl had done something he couldn't buy with all his billions. She had given his son confidence, hope, and dignity. She had reminded Richard that true kindness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from the heart. As Amara disappeared down the park path, Richard sat silently beside Ethan. The morning felt different now, warmer, brighter, more alive. Ethan looked at his father. She was like a superhero, wasn't she? Richard chuckled softly. Yes, buddy. She really was, he said, and somehow, I think this isn't the last time we'll see her. He didn't know then how right he was. In just a few days, the paths of their lives would cross again, not by chance but by destiny. And the moment that started as an unexpected encounter would soon turn into a story that changed them all forever. Amara walked quickly toward the cafe, her heart still beating fast. The scene she had just witnessed kept replaying in her mind. She wasn't angry anymore, just a little sad that kids could be so cruel. She had seen people being treated unfairly before, but somehow seeing it happen to that little boy felt different. Maybe it was the way he had looked down, trying to disappear into his wheelchair. Maybe it was the way his father's eyes had filled with pain. Meanwhile, back at the park, Richard and Ethan sat quietly on the bench. Ethan was holding a small toy car in his hand. Spinning its wheels slowly, his father watched him, feeling a strange mix of pride and heartbreak. She was brave, huh? Ethan said softly. Yes, she was, Richard replied. Very brave. He smiled faintly, but inside he was still thinking about the girl who had stepped up without hesitation. A few minutes passed and Ethan seemed lost in thought. Then he asked, Dad, why did they laugh at me? The question hit Richard like a stone. He took a deep breath before answering. Some people laugh because they don't understand, Ethan, he said gently. They see something different and think it's strange. But what they don't realize is that being different makes you special. Ethan nodded, though his eyes still looked a little sad across the park. Amara had almost reached the exit when she stopped. Something inside her told her to turn back. Maybe it was her heart, maybe it was her conscience, but she couldn't just walk away. She looked over her shoulder and saw the boy still sitting quietly. His father beside him, the group of boys had gone, but something told her that her job wasn't done yet. She turned around and started walking back. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to them. When she reached the bench again, Richard looked up in surprise. You came back, he said. Yeah, Amara smiled. I just wanted to check if you both were okay. Ethan grinned shyly. We're okay now, he said. Thank you. Amara sat down on the grass beside Ethan. You know, she said, when I was your age, I used to get teased too. Ethan looked curious. Really? But why? He asked. Because my clothes were old and I didn't have fancy things, she said with a little laugh. People can be mean when they don't understand your life. But you can't let them decide who you are, Ethan smiled. And for the first time that day, Richard saw his son's confidence begin to return. It was small but real, like a light slowly coming back on. Richard felt something shift inside him. He had spent so much time trying to protect Ethan from the world that he'd forgotten the world could sometimes protect Ethan too, through people like Amara. Just then, the same group of boys appeared again. Walking from the other side of the park, Richard's heart tightened. He was about to stand, but Amara placed a hand on his arm. Let me handle this, she said quietly. Her tone was calm but full of fire. The boys saw her and smirked. Oh, look, the hero's back, one said mockingly. Amara stood up, her eyes steady. You're right, she said boldly. I am back. Because I want you to understand something. The boys fell silent, unsure of what she was about to say. You think it's fun to laugh at someone like him, she said, pointing gently toward Ethan. But you have no idea how much strength it takes to live every day with courage when people like you make it harder. He's stronger than all of you combined. The tallest boy crossed his arms, pretending not to care. He's just sitting there. What's so strong about that? Amara stepped closer. You see someone sitting? I see someone who wakes up every day knowing the world isn't built for him. And he still smiles. You see a wheelchair. I see a fighter. Her words hit deep. The boys looked down, uncomfortable. She wasn't shouting, but her voice carried across the park. People nearby began to watch, curious about what was happening. You can't measure strength by muscles, she said. You measure it by kindness, by patience, by heart. And if you ever laugh at someone like him again, remember, you're not showing power. You're showing weakness. The park fell silent. The boys shuffled awkwardly, one muttering an apology before they all turned and walked away for good. Ethan's eyes sparkled with admiration. You really are brave, he said softly. Amara smiled. So are you, she replied. Richard stood there, speechless. He had spent years in boardrooms surrounded by powerful people, but he had never witnessed power like this, the power of pure courage. I don't even know how to thank you, he said. His voice low, Amara shook her head. You don't have to, sir. I just did what I hoped someone would do for me. Ethan reached out his small hand. Can we be friends? He asked. Amara laughed gently and nodded. Of course, she said. Friends look out for each other. She pushed his wheelchair a little. Pretending it was a race, Ethan giggled, and for a moment, the park was filled with laughter again. The good kind, the pure kind. Richard watched them, feeling a lump form in his throat. It was a simple moment, but to him it meant everything. It reminded him that no matter how much money he had, he couldn't buy what that girl had just given his son. Confidence, happiness, and hope as they said goodbye. Richard asked quietly, Do you work nearby? Yes, sir, at the cafe on Rosewood Street, she said. I just work part-time after school. He nodded thoughtfully. You're remarkable, Amara, he said sincerely. She smiled shyly. I just do what's right. That's all. And then she waved and walked away. Richard looked down at Ethan, who was still smiling. She's special. Dad, Ethan said. Yes, she is, Richard replied, watching her fade into the distance. She's more special than she knows. Little did Amara realize that her brave defense had already started a ripple that would soon return to her in ways she could never imagine. A simple act of kindness in a quiet park was about to open the door to a new life, one that would change her story forever. The next morning, the city woke up to the sound of traffic and birds. Just like any other day, but for Richard Hale, something felt different. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl from the park, the one who had stood up for his son without knowing who they were. Her courage had left a mark on his heart. The more he thought about her, the more he realized how rare such kindness was. Richard had met thousands of people in his life, business leaders, politicians, celebrities, but none had moved him the way that teenage girl had. She had nothing to gain, no reason to step in, yet she did. Simply because it was right, that kind of bravery was priceless. He wanted to thank her properly, but all he knew was her name, Amara, and that she worked at a cafe on Rosewood Street. Later that day, Richard decided to take Ethan for a drive. Where are we going, Dad? Ethan asked excitedly. You'll see, Richard said with a smile. They arrived at a cozy cafe with a faded sign that read, Sunny Beans. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm. The smell of coffee and warm pastries filled the air. Inside, people chatted softly while music played from an old radio. Behind the counter, Amara was busy taking orders. Her hair was tied back neatly, and a little bit of flour dusted her apron. She didn't notice them at first until Ethan waved. Hi, he called out, her eyes widened in surprise. Ethan! You're here! She said, smiling brightly. And you too, sir, she added, recognizing Richard. Richard smiled back. We wanted to thank you, he said. You didn't have to do what you did yesterday, but you did. And it meant more than you know. Amara shook her head quickly. Please don't thank me. Anyone should have done it. But not everyone does. Richard replied softly. That's what makes it special. Ethan leaned forward in his chair. Dad says you're a hero, he said with a grin. Amara laughed. Oh, I don't know about that, she said. I just don't like seeing people get picked on. Richard could see the honesty in her words. There was no pride or showing off, just pure goodness. When her break came, Amara sat with them at a small corner table. They talked like old friends. Richard asked about her school, her family, and her dreams. At first she hesitated, not wanting to sound like she was complaining, but Richard's kind eyes made her feel comfortable. So she told the truth. "I go to Crestwood High," she said. "I'm in my final year. I work here after school to help my mom. She's a nurse and we take care of my little brother, Jamal." Richard listened carefully, his heart growing heavier with every word. "That's a lot of responsibility," he said. "You must be proud of yourself." "I just do what I can," Amara replied humbly. "My dream is to become a doctor one day. I want to help kids like Ethan. Kids who need extra care but don't always get it." Ethan's face lit up. "You want to help kids like me?" he asked. "Of course," Amara said. "You're the reason people like me should study hard and make a difference." Her smile was gentle, but her eyes shone with determination. Richard felt something stir deep inside him. It had been years since someone had spoken about helping others without expecting anything in return. "That's a wonderful dream," he said. "But medicine school is expensive." Amara nodded. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I'm saving every bit I can. I'll apply for scholarships too. I don't want to give up, even if it takes time." Her words reminded Richard of his own journey. Long before the billions, before the fame, he had once been a young man with nothing but dreams. But life had been kind to him, or maybe he had just met the right people at the right time. Now, sitting across from this brave young girl, he realized it was his turn to be that person for someone else. As they continued talking, Ethan told Amara about his favorite cartoons and how he wanted to design a super wheelchair one day. "It's going to fly and have buttons and lights," he said. Waving his hands excitedly, Amara laughed. "Then you'll be my first patient when I become a doctor," she said playfully. "We'll make sure you can race anyone you want." The three of them laughed together, drawing smiles from nearby tables. For a brief moment, they weren't a billionaire, a waitress and a boy in a wheelchair. They were just people, connected by kindness, by humanity, by fate. When their conversation ended, Richard stood up. "We should let you get back to work," he said. "But thank you again, Amara." "You don't have to thank me," she repeated, smiling. "You just have to promise to bring Ethan here again. I'll make him a free muffin." "Deal," Ethan said. Raising his little hand for a high five, she laughed and met his hand with a soft smack. As Richard wheeled Ethan out of the cafe, he looked back once more. Amara was behind the counter again, laughing with a customer. Her energy filled the room like sunlight. He felt something deep inside, admiration mixed with inspiration. "Dad," Ethan said quietly, "she's different, isn't she?" "Yes," Richard said. "She's one of those rare people who make the world better just by being in it." When they got home, Richard couldn't focus on his work. He kept thinking about her, her words, her strength, her dreams. That night, he sat in his study long after Ethan went to bed. The city lights glowed outside his window as he opened his laptop and began typing. He searched for the best medical scholarships in the country. He made phone calls, sent messages, and wrote emails. By the time the clock struck midnight, Richard had already decided. He was going to change Amara's life, not out of pity but out of respect. She had defended his son with courage, and now it was his turn to defend her dreams with opportunity. Somewhere across town, Amara was sitting at her small kitchen table, finishing her homework by candlelight because the power had gone out again. She had no idea that her kindness had already set something powerful in motion. Life was about to surprise her in the most extraordinary way. That night, long after the city had gone quiet, Richard Hale sat alone in his study. The soft hum of his desk lamp filled the silence, and papers lay scattered across the polished wood. His phone buzzed with unread messages from business partners, but he ignored them. For once, his mind wasn't on deals or numbers. It was on a girl named Amara Johnson. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline through the tall glass windows. The world outside sparkled with a million lights, each one belonging to someone living their own story. But in that sea of light, one face stood out in his thoughts. A brave young girl who had defended his son without hesitation. A stranger, yet somehow not a stranger anymore. Richard had met countless people, but very few had left such an impression. He thought about her words, her smile, and the way she spoke about her dreams. There was sincerity in her voice, a strength that came from struggle. She reminded him of his younger self, before the money, before the fame, Before the world started calling him a billionaire, he had once been just a boy with a dream, too. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. It was faded and worn, showing a young Richard standing beside a broken-down bicycle outside a small house. He smiled softly, remembering those days when he had to work at a gas station just to pay for his college books. People had helped him back then, kind strangers who believed in his potential. Without them, he wouldn't be where he was. Now, he realized, it was his turn to be that kind stranger for someone else. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "James," he said quietly, "I need you to look into someone for me." James sounded half asleep. "Of course, sir. Who?" Richard hesitated for a moment, then said, "Her name is Amara Johnson. She works at the Sunny Beans Cafe on Rosewood Street. I want to know everything. Her school, her grades, her family situation, but do it discreetly. No one should know." "Understood, sir," James replied, still curious, but too professional to ask questions. When he hung up, Richard felt a sense of peace wash over him. It wasn't just a business decision this time. It was something from the heart. He stood by the window and looked out at the city again, whispering to himself, "You changed my son's life, Amara. Now it's time someone changed yours." The next morning, the sunlight spilled through the wide windows of the Hale mansion. Ethan wheeled himself into the dining room where his father sat, sipping coffee. "Morning, Dad," he said cheerfully. "Morning, champ," Richard smiled. "I was thinking, how would you like to visit the cafe again this weekend?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "To see Amara?" "Exactly," Richard replied, hiding a smile behind his cup. "I think she deserves some good news." Meanwhile, across town, Amara was getting ready for school. The morning rush was familiar, helping her little brother pack his bag, making breakfast and checking on her mom before leaving. Her mother smiled sleepily. "You're working too hard, baby," she said softly. "You need rest," Amara kissed her cheek. "One day, Mom, when I become a doctor, you'll rest all you want." Her mom chuckled. "I'll hold you to that." She didn't know that her life was already changing quietly behind the scenes. While she walked to school, James, Richard's assistant, was already meeting with the school principal, reviewing Amara's grades and attendance. "She's one of our brightest students," the principal said proudly. "Always polite, always on time, and always helping others. She's been applying for scholarships, but funding has been difficult." James took notes carefully. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. "Mr. Hale just wants to support her education." That evening, James returned to the Hale residence with a folder in his hand. Richard opened it carefully. Inside were Amara's report cards, her application essays, and even a handwritten letter she had sent to a scholarship foundation. In the letter she had written, "I don't have much, but I have hope. I believe that kindness can change the world. Even if it starts small." Richard read it twice, then placed his hand over his chest, whispering, "You already have." He spent the next few hours making calls. He contacted a few of his connections in education and philanthropy. "I want to start a new scholarship program," he said firmly, "for hardworking students who never give up. Let's call it the Amara Johnson Scholarship." There was silence on the line before his associate replied, "That's a beautiful idea, sir. Who is she?" Richard smiled. "Someone who reminded me what real strength looks like." Later that night, Richard sat beside Ethan, reading him a bedtime story. But halfway through, Ethan interrupted, "Dad, when can we tell Amara about the surprise?" Richard laughed softly. "Soon, buddy, very soon." Ethan grinned. "She's going to be so happy." "Yes," Richard said. "She deserves to be." The next few days passed quietly. Amara continued working hard, completely unaware of what was being planned for her. Every day she woke up, went to school, worked her shift, and fell asleep dreaming about her future. But destiny was already weaving a new path for her, one that she couldn't yet see, and on the other side of the city, Richard Hale was preparing to give her that future. It wasn't a grand gesture for the cameras or the newspapers. It was a quiet decision, born from gratitude, respect, and admiration. A decision that would not only change Amara's life, but his own as well. As he sat in the dim glow of his study one last time that week, he looked at the framed picture of Ethan and whispered, "Kindness is contagious, son. You and Amara just reminded me of that." Outside, the night sky shimmered with stars, as if silently blessing the decision he had made, and somewhere across town, Amara looked up at the same sky from her small window, whispering her nightly prayer. "Please help me keep going. I won't give up." She didn't know it yet, but the universe had already answered. It was a Friday morning when Amara's life began to shift. Though she had no idea yet, the sun peeked gently through her thin curtains. Painting the walls golden, she woke up early, as always, helping her brother Jamal get ready for school. Her mom had already left for her hospital shift, leaving a note on the table that said, "Proud of you, my sunshine." Amara smiled when she read it, folded the note carefully and tucked it into her notebook. It was her good luck charm. After breakfast, she packed her bag and hurried off to school. She didn't know that, at that very same moment, a quiet buzz of activity had started in a tall glass building across the city. Inside one of its offices sat Richard Hale, watching the clock. He had been waiting for this day since he made his decision today. The Hale Foundation would make a call that would change a young girl's future forever. By mid-morning, Amara was sitting in her math class. Trying to focus, the teacher's voice droned softly as numbers filled the blackboard. But Amara's mind was somewhere else. She was worried about the electricity bill at home and whether her mom would be too tired after work. Still, she kept a small smile on her face. She always believed that better days were coming. Even if they took time, when lunch break came, she took her sandwich and sat under a tree with her best friend, Tasha. They talked about exams, dreams, and life after graduation. "You're definitely getting into medical school," Tasha said confidently. "You're the smartest person I know," Amara laughed, shaking her head. "Smart doesn't pay tuition." "Tasha," she said, "but I'll find a way." Just then, her old phone buzzed in her pocket. The number was unknown. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello," she said politely. A calm voice on the other end replied, "Good afternoon, is this Miss Amara Johnson?" "Yes, that's me," she said, her heart suddenly racing. "This is Clara from the Hale Foundation," the woman continued warmly. "I'm calling with some wonderful news." Amara frowned slightly, confused. "The Hale Foundation?" She repeated, I don't think I know them." "That's all right," Clara said with a smile in her voice. "We know about you, Miss Johnson. We've reviewed your academic records, your volunteer work, and your letters to scholarship programs, and I'm pleased to tell you that you've been selected for a full educational sponsorship through the Hale Scholars Program." Amara froze. The words didn't sink in right away. "I'm sorry, what?" she whispered. "You've been awarded a full scholarship," Clara repeated gently. "It will cover your university tuition, books, housing, and living expenses. You'll also receive a monthly stipend and mentoring support. Congratulations, Amara. You've earned this." Tears filled Amara's eyes before she even realized it. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake," Clara said kindly. "You were chosen because of your strength, your determination, and your kindness. We believe in you." Amara couldn't speak for a moment. The world around her seemed to blur. The laughter of students, the breeze through the trees, everything faded. She blinked away tears and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You deserve it," Clara said warmly. "There's one more thing, Miss Johnson. The sponsor who made this possible asked me to tell you personally. He says your courage inspired him and his family, and they're proud to support your journey." Amara's breath caught. "My courage?" she repeated. "Who is he?" Clara smiled through the phone. "His name is Richard Hale," she said. "You might remember him and his son Ethan from the park." Amara gasped softly. The image of that morning came rushing back. The laughter of the boys, Ethan's shy smile, the man sitting beside him. "Mr. Hale?" she whispered in disbelief. "Yes," Clara replied. "He asked us to tell you that you've changed his family's life. And now it's his turn to change yours." Amara sat under the tree, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tasha watched in confusion. "What's wrong? What happened?" she asked. Amara laughed through her tears, her voice shaking with joy. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "Everything's finally right." When she got home that evening, her mom was sitting on the couch, exhausted but smiling faintly. Amara ran into her arms, laughing and crying all at once. "Mom, you won't believe this," she said breathlessly. "I got a scholarship, a full one. Everything is paid for." Her mother froze, her eyes wide. "Amara, are you serious?" "Yes, it's real," Amara cried, holding up the email that had followed the call. "The Hale Foundation is paying for everything." Her mom covered her mouth, tears spilling down her face. "Oh, baby," she whispered, hugging her tight. "You did it. You never gave up." Jamal came running from his room. "Are we rich now?" he asked, everyone laughing through their tears. "Not rich," Amara said, smiling down at him. "But free, Jamal. Free to dream." That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Amara thought about Ethan, his laughter, and the way he'd called her a hero. She never imagined that one small act of kindness could lead to this. She had defended a little boy, and in return, the universe had defended her dreams across town. Richard sat on his porch with Ethan beside him. "Watching the stars, do you think she knows yet?" Ethan asked. "She knows," Richard said softly, smiling. "And I bet she's smiling too. We did a good thing, right, Dad?" "We did," Richard replied. "But she did the bravest thing first." The wind blew gently through the night as two families, once strangers, now shared the same unspoken joy. Two lives connected by courage, kindness, and fate. And though the call had ended, its echo would last forever. The following week, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter over the city. Maybe it was just coincidence. Or maybe life really does glow differently when something good happens. For Amara Johnson, it felt like the start of a whole new chapter. Ever since the call from the Hale Foundation, her world had changed in ways she could hardly believe. She had gone from worrying about rent and tuition to holding an official scholarship letter in her hands, complete with the Hale Foundation's gold seal. It didn't just promise education. It promised freedom. Freedom to dream without fear. To plan without doubt. At first, her mother couldn't stop crying tears of joy. Every time she looked at the printed letter on their kitchen table, she would whisper, "God is good." Her younger brother Jamal had told everyone in school that his sister was going to be a doctor. "A real one," he'd said proudly. While his teacher smiled, but for Amara, the best part wasn't the money or the scholarship. It was the fact that someone believed in her, someone who didn't have to, someone who simply chose to. 2 days after the announcement, Amara received an invitation from the Hale Foundation. They wanted her to come to the office for an official introduction and a small ceremony. She read the message 3 times, her hands shaking with excitement. She had never been inside such a big place before. On the morning of the visit, she wore her best outfit, a simple blue dress her mother had ironed the night before. Her shoes were slightly worn, but she polished them until they looked almost new. As she stood in front of the tall glass building, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. When she entered the lobby, she was greeted by warm smiles. People in suits nodded politely as she passed, and a kind woman led her to the elevator. "Mr. Hale is waiting for you on the top floor," she said gently. Amara nodded, clutching her bag nervously. The elevator doors opened to a wide, elegant room filled with light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. And in the middle of it all stood Richard Hale, dressed neatly but casually. Beside him, Ethan sat in his sleek wheelchair, his face lighting up the moment he saw her. "Amara," he shouted excitedly, waving. She laughed, her nervousness melting away instantly. "Ethan," she said, walking over to him. "You've grown taller already." "Dad says that's the vitamins," Ethan said proudly, making her giggle. Richard smiled as she approached. "Amara," he said warmly, "it's good to see you again." "It's good to see you too, sir," she replied shyly. "I still can't believe all of this is real." "It's very real," Richard said, handing her a folder. "And it's only the beginning." She opened the folder carefully. Inside was her official scholarship agreement, documents for university admission, and a personal letter, written in Richard's handwriting. It read, "For the girl who reminded us all what courage looks like, may this help you fly as high as your heart dares to go." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You already did," Richard replied. "You thanked me the moment you stood up for my son that day." Ethan grinned. "You're like my superhero," he said, "and now we're friends forever." Amara smiled. "That's a deal," she said. From that day forward, the Hale family and the Johnson family became closer than anyone could have imagined. Richard often visited their small home, bringing books for Jamal and groceries for Amara's mother. Not as charity, but as friendship. He respected them deeply, never treating them as people who needed help, but as equals who deserved opportunity. Ethan and Jamal became inseparable whenever they visited the park. The boys would race, Ethan in his wheelchair, Jamal running beside him, cheering him on. The laughter that echoed through the park was pure and genuine. It made Richard and Amara's mother smile every time they watched. Sometimes, after her classes, Amara would visit the Hale mansion to tutor Ethan in science. He loved learning about the human body. "Maybe I'll be a doctor too," he said once. Amara laughed. "Then I'll be your teacher someday, promise?" he asked. "Promise," she replied. Richard watched their friendship grow with quiet pride. He admired Amara's humility. Despite everything she had achieved, she never boasted, never acted differently. She still worked part-time at the cafe on weekends, not because she had to, but because she said it kept her grounded. One evening after dinner at the Hale residence, Amara stood by the balcony looking out at the city lights. Richard joined her, holding 2 cups of tea. "You know," he said softly, "before I met you, I thought I understood success. I thought it meant numbers, profits, recognition. But you taught me that true success is helping someone rise," Amara smiled. "And you taught me that miracles can start with small kindnesses." There was a comfortable silence between them. The city shimmered below, alive with possibilities. Ethan's laughter drifted through the window behind them, and for the first time in years, Richard felt complete. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Amara excelled in her studies, topping her class. Her professors praised her dedication, and news about her scholarship began to spread. Newspapers ran small stories about the girl who inspired a billionaire, though she never sought attention. Instead, she spent her free time volunteering at hospitals, helping children like Ethan. She would kneel beside their beds, hold their hands, and tell them, "You can do anything you dream of." And every time she said those words, she meant them, because she had lived them. For both families, life had found a new rhythm. The Hale mansion wasn't just a home of wealth anymore. It had become a place of warmth and laughter. And the Johnson home, though small, now carried a light of hope that touched everyone who entered. It was more than just a scholarship. It was a bridge between 2 different worlds, between privilege and struggle, between pain and healing, and every step they took together proved that kindness could connect hearts in ways money never could. As the sun set one evening, Amara and Ethan sat together in the park where it had all begun. Ethan looked up at her and said, "You know, I think that day wasn't just luck." Amara smiled. "No, Ethan," she said softly. "It was destiny." Years passed like pages turning in a beautiful book. Time moved gently, carrying with it the echoes of laughter, courage, and gratitude. The park where it all began was still there, greener now, more alive, a symbol of everything that kindness could grow into. Amara Johnson was no longer the shy girl working at a cafe. She was Dr. Amara Johnson now, a proud graduate in pediatric rehabilitation medicine. Her dream had come true, and she had done it with humility and grace. Her white coat carried more than her name. It carried every struggle, every sleepless night, and every whispered prayer she and her family had ever made. The Hale Foundation had expanded since that day. What started as one scholarship had turned into a national movement, helping hundreds of students just like Amara. Richard Hale called it the Ripple Program, because, as he once told the board, one act of kindness creates waves that never stop. Richard was older now, his hair silvering at the sides, but his spirit was lighter than ever. He often said that meeting Amara and watching her grow had been the greatest investment of his life. Not in business, but in humanity. His son Ethan, now a confident young man in college, still used his wheelchair, but he no longer saw it as a limitation. He called it his wings, and he used them to inspire others. One sunny afternoon, Amara arrived at the Hale residence, the place that had become her second home. She was greeted by Ethan, who raced up to her with his wide smile. "Dr. Amara," he shouted playfully, "I need a checkup." She laughed, kneeling beside him. "You again?" she teased. "Didn't I just see you last week?" "I think I grew taller," he said proudly. "You definitely grew stronger," she replied. Richard appeared from the garden holding a small box in his hand. "Ah, our favorite doctor has arrived," he said warmly. "We were waiting for you," Amara smiled. "You didn't have to call me your favorite, Mr. Hale. You have a whole team of doctors now." "Yes," he said, "but only one who changed our lives." They sat together under the same tree where Ethan used to feed the ducks years ago. The air was warm, filled with memories. Richard handed her the box. "Open it," he said. Inside, she found a delicate golden pendant shaped like a small ripple in water, engraved with the words, "For the one who started it all." Her eyes softened as tears filled them. "You didn't have to," she began. But Richard shook his head. "Yes, I did," he said quietly. "Because what you gave us was more than courage. You gave us purpose," Amara smiled through her tears. "You gave me hope," she whispered. "You gave me wings," Ethan grinned. "And you gave me a best friend," he added proudly, making both of them laugh. That evening, as the sun began to set, the three of them walked, or in Ethan's case, rolled on through the park. It was crowded as usual. Children playing, parents talking, life buzzing around them, and yet, among all those people, Amara could still picture that one day long ago, the day that had changed everything. She remembered the boys who had mocked Ethan, the moment she had spoken up, the way Richard had looked at her afterward. She realized now that kindness didn't need a plan. It didn't need permission. It just needed courage in the right moment. A small girl ran past them laughing, pushing her little brother in a toy wheelchair. Amara watched them with a smile. Her heart swelled with quiet pride. She had opened a rehabilitation clinic near that same park, the Ethan Hale Center, dedicated to children with physical disabilities. Families from all over came there for care, free of cost. Inside the clinic's lobby hung a large photo. It showed young Amara in her school uniform, standing beside Ethan in his wheelchair under a headline that read, "Kindness changes everything." Below the photo, in small letters, it said, "Founded with love and gratitude by Dr. Amara Johnson and the Hale Foundation." Richard often visited the clinic to speak with parents, telling them his story, reminding them that hope can be found in the most unexpected moments. "It all started in a park," he would say, "with a girl who refused to walk away." That phrase became famous, printed on posters carved on the clinic's walls, and quoted in interviews. But for Richard, it wasn't just a slogan. It was a truth that had changed him forever. One evening, as Amara locked up the clinic after a long day, she stood at the door and looked out at the sunset. She felt a gentle breeze brush her face, carrying the laughter of children behind her, and she smiled. "We did it," she whispered softly to herself. "We really did." At the same time, across the city, Ethan sat on his balcony with his laptop, writing an article for his university's blog. The title read, "The Girl Who Saved My Life Without Even Knowing It." In it, he wrote, "She thought she was defending me, but she was really defending kindness, and because of her, I learned that strength isn't about walking on two legs. It's about standing up for what's right." When Amara read his article later that night, she cried quietly, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She thought about how one moment, one choice to stand up, had built bridges between hearts, changed destinies, and created ripples that touched lives she would never even meet. Years later, when reporters asked Richard Hale about his greatest achievement, he didn't talk about his empire or his wealth. He simply said, "My greatest achievement was recognizing greatness in someone else." And when they asked Amara about her greatest blessing, she smiled and said, "Being at the right place at the right time, and having the courage to care." In the end, their story wasn't just about kindness. It was about connection, about how one act can echo across lifetimes, shaping the world quietly but powerfully, like ripples in a pond. And every time the wind passed through that old city park, brushing the leaves and stirring the water, it seemed to whisper the same lesson again and again, that kindness, once shared, never dies. It only multiplies forever.